So, how do you deal with chronic pain? For me, that's a big question. And frankly, the answer is probably just like everybody else, the best I can. Everyone is different. Mine is not something that is often visible. So, I've learned to hide my facial expressions or refrain from making, grunt noises when the big spasms hit me, or even when I'm getting 1,000 little shocks. Other times it will take me to my knees and contort my body, depending on the severity of the spasms. So I've learned to adapt to it over the years. What used to break me down into tears as a kid is now just kind of a background noise, almost like an old TV static. So it's always there. It's annoying as hell, but I've adapted and for the most part can move forward throughout the day depending on the frequency of the spasms, which is another level that I still struggle with sometimes. It can be both unpredictable, coming out of nowhere for no good reason, and then completely expected if I've stressed my mind or body out too much. And like the name suggests, it's chronic, so it doesn't take days off. I'm hoping that me talking about how I manage it on a day-to-day basis and my experience with it can help someone out there that finds it hard to relate to others. So just know that you're not alone, and there might be some things that we have in common. So the first thing is just to kind of acknowledge the fact that it's there. I've learned to stop pretending that it's going to go away someday. Sure, I remain hopeful, and we should all be hopeful. That maybe in the future there will be new technologies and breakthroughs in science. But today there isn't. It's here, and I just have to deal with it. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I'm just going to deal with it. I've learned to pace myself, rest when I need to, and I definitely don't feel guilty about that anymore, or just saying no when I know it's going to affect me in a very negative way. Living a life in constant pain means learning and accepting your limits and honoring them. For me, at least, it's the living part that I really try to focus on. That's the most important thing, right? You're living with pain, but don't forget about the living. Being with friends and family will always be worth whatever pain I get in return. I don't care how many days of punishment I have to go through afterwards. I will always choose having some kind of life where there is the opportunity. And when I'm dealing with the aftermath, I just remind myself that no matter how miserable it is, life is more than this. So how does mine manifest? So my pain is kind of all over the place when it comes to trying to lock it down and describe it to people. So it's really frustrating when I'm asked to describe the pain, because putting it into words is just very difficult. So the spasms on my left leg, that's like being electrocuted, and so my body tenses up. Sometimes it's enough to make me hunch over into a fetal position, where my arms and my fingers just immediately seize up, and it's really, really difficult to move them or unclasp them, and I just have to let it do its thing, and subside back into that background noise. And when that happens, just being touched by someone is excruciating, and especially, and it sucks because like with my wife, she's only trying to show concern, but it makes it worse, and so I feel awful when I have to yell and say, "Don't touch me," because that expectation of that the jolt that I'm about to get through what I'm already dealing with at that time is just immeasurable. And it ends up being all consuming, and the quickest way to stop it from being worse is just to yell stop, as quick as I can. And then there's the right leg. For me, it's more of the ankle and the foot than the whole leg. And I don't know if that's just because I have limited sensation feeling in my legs as it is because of the spina bifida thing. But yeah, it's kind of localized in the foot and the ankle, and it affects the calf muscle there because I can feel when that gets tense and tight, but not, for whatever reason, not above the knee. Whereas in my left side, it's only above the knee, and that's because I have no feeling or control below the knee. So it's almost a yin and yang just in my legs. That pain isn't as much of an electrocution feeling. There's like a jolt of electricity, but it's at least not consistently. I don't even know. It's more of It's a burning, it's a tightness, a pressure or something there. There's a throbbing, uncontrollable twitching when it really, gets going. And it's almost a deeper pain. So it's really hard to describe. And maybe that's because my right only really started in 2013. And so maybe I'm just used to my left, and so it's hard to compare the two. I don't know. Because my left has been consistent since 1997, and it was off and on before then, but it was, yeah. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's really hard to explain. When it comes to strategies for my body, it's been a mixed bag of treatments. For years, I resisted pharmaceuticals, but that was when things were localized in my left leg only. Once my right leg became affected, I no longer had a literal good leg to stand on. And so I started trying every medication that would get prescribed to me. And then, of course, you're in constant fear of the side effects and the chance that I could become addicted, which I did not want to do or want to become. Unfortunately, they were all either temporary fixes or no help at all, no matter how intense the drugs were. So swimming is a decent therapy. It's not 100%, but it still has really positive effects, especially while you're in the water, and that weightlessness obviously has a major effect on how the tethered cord and all the scar tissue around it. On good days, I really try to push myself to move and not use my wheelchair if at all possible. My goal is to, try to strengthen my legs, even though that can be really, really difficult. And then on bad days, I can't actually do much at all. And I have to consider the fact that if I try to push myself, I may ruin any chance of being active tomorrow, which doesn't affect just me, but also any life that my wife and I can have together. And the last thing I want is to always be the reason why we can't do anything. So I have to rest, and I have to wait for the severity to dial it down again into something more manageable. And that's okay. I don't feel guilty about resting. I used to feel guilty. I mean, sometimes I do, but not for that reason, not for knowing that this is only going to help us tomorrow kind of thing. So by far, the single best thing I've done over the last few months has been ketamine therapy. And I'm talking about in a clinical setting, closely monitored and starting with a really low dosage until we found one that worked. And it was amazing. It really, really worked. It actually gave me back one good leg. It doesn't help as much on the left leg. I don't know why. I mean, no one really knows why. It really works the way it does anyway. But that's okay, because all I wanted was one good leg back. And so it kind of gave me that back. And it's made a world of difference. And I feel like I've been able to travel a little bit more, kind of push through things a little bit more. And I still need a cane just because, when my left leg does its thing, I need a way to catch myself or not make a scene out in public. But yeah, I feel confident to push myself while walking now. And that's an amazing feeling. And now it's funny, the timing of this video is interesting because the last ketamine therapy treatment I had didn't actually work. And even though it was the same dosage as the one before, that did have an amazing effect. And from what I understand, it seems like any negative emotions or anxieties that you go into the session with are like amplified during the experience. So I went down what a lot of people call a K-hole, where I was going from one extreme to the next in terms of fears and anxiety and existential dread. And for whatever reason, all that made the treatment completely ineffective. And when I reached out to schedule the next session, I was told that I can only have 6 in a year, which is crazy. I was caught off guard. If that was in the fine print, I did not realize that. So now I have to wait for, at least at this time, about 5 more months before I can have any hope of relief, which means I have to go back to my doctor and start back on narcotics again, which I absolutely hate the thought of. But that's where we are. And like I said before, we got to keep moving forward and keep that hope up. And it's been frustrating because it's exhausting. It affects me at work in a lot of different ways, but that's all right. You gotta keep moving forward. And then there's the mental health of it all. Pain affects so much more than just your body. It gets into your mind. It gets deep into your mind. And I've had to work on that too. When I was a kid, I just had, sporadic bouts of tethered cord syndrome. I think it just came with being born with spina bifida. But I would go in for a quick procedure and they would release it and I would have relief until the next one kind of happened. But once it became permanent, when I was 15, almost 28 years ago at the time of this video, it changed everything. I couldn't understand why the universe was punishing me, and I would cry a lot and beg my mom, beg the doctors, just cut off my legs, please, give me that relief. And of course, no one would. But eventually, I don't know where it came from, but I just had to tell myself that this was a test, and I'm meant for more. So this is just a test to get me used to the pain, and that this pain was preparing me for a bigger battle in my future. And I know it may sound silly, fantastical, but it helped. It made a difference, and it made me want to take it head on. And I would get angry after the worst spasms and just yell into the air, bring it on. You don't have what it takes to defeat me. And I know it's cheesy, but it makes a difference. And it did make a difference when I was a kid. One of my favorite movie quotes that I always connected with is from The Count of Monte Cristo. And this came out years later, but it kind of backed me up on my way of thinking. And the quote is, "Life is a storm, my young friend. You will bask in the sunlight one moment, be shattered on the rocks the next. What makes you a man is what you do when that storm comes. You must look into that storm and shout as you did in Rome, do your worst, for I will do mine." And so I would literally say that last line when my spasms would get really bad and take me down, and I would say, do your worst. And it helped. I feel like this can apply to everyone too, because regardless of gender, what makes you stronger is what you do when that storm comes. A storm that has no escape, and the only choice is to take it head on or let it consume you. And we do not give it that power. And I've said that before in other videos. Do not give it the power to consume you. We do not allow it to consume us. But even with all that said, once it took out both my legs, then it became much harder to use that as my motivating factor, because like I said, it gets you deep in your psyche, and it can bring you down, and you have to claw your way back up to a more positive place, which can be really, really difficult. And there are days when I'm so physically and mentally drained from straining against the spasms that talking is too much. I get bloody noses, which I need to follow up on. I've come to hate the phone or talking without being able to busy my mind with something else. So yeah, the phone is kind of the anti that, because you need to focus on what the person is saying, and it's very, very difficult for me to do that now. So lately, I do my best to control my stress levels, because both physical and emotional stress trigger the spasms and spike in pain levels, which is something I never expected. The emotional stress triggers. So staying calm is really, really important. So mostly I just keep my mind busy and off the pain. And then constantly. So much, in fact, that it's actually become increasingly difficult to relax and not do several things at once. And of course, that creates its own issues. I've developed this insatiable need to multitask, just to keep my mind off my legs. I just can't sit still. Watching a movie becomes excruciating because I need to busy my mind and do something else. Otherwise, it feels like my legs, like, oh, your mind is free. Sweet, pay attention to me. Bam, zap. It jumps at it has a mind of its own. It really does. But yeah, it's an evolving thing, and I have to evolve with it. Whether it's my routine, my way of thinking, my approach to things that life decides to throw my way. I feel like this applies to everybody. We have to flow like water. Living with chronic pain doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong in a way that most people do not see. And if you're dealing with this too, you are not alone. I know there are times where you feel like you can take anything on and you feel amazing. And then out of nowhere, that despair and that exhaustion just hits you so hard. You just want it all to end and finally be at peace. I've been there so many times. I know that feeling all too well, but the biggest thing, for me at least, is not letting a lifetime of pain define you or let that despair control you. That never-ending pain isn't who you are any more than any other superficial aspect of our identity. Those things do not define who we are. It's what you do in the face of difficult things. It's how you treat others. It's the hope that you hang on to, even when the world around us feels absolutely hopeless. It's the hope that you pass on to others, that things can and will be better. All of our legacy that we leave behind is how we've affected others around us. And hopefully that means in a really positive way. There's so much in the world that is outside of our control, but how we respond and how we deal with the difficult things, that is ours, and that cannot be taken away. So if you're someone who has been able to relate to what I've shared, or you want to support someone in your life who's in pain, or just curious, thank you for listening. Let's just keep the conversation going, and remember that just because you can't see it with your eyes doesn't mean it's not there.